All right, we're going to talk a little bit about negative exponents. Just give you a few tips and pointers, and then try and give you on this page specifically where the negatives actually are on the exponents, because this is didn't print out super well on it, and so some of those negatives uh, don't show up very well, but you can kind of have an idea of what to look for. So when we're looking at negative exponents, when we have x to the negative a power, we will rewrite that as 1 over x to the positive a power. So basically, all that means is if you have anything to the negative first power, so if I have a negative like 2 to the negative first power, that would just equal 1/2. So 5 to the negative 1 is 1/5 or 0.2. So that negative really just means you're taking the reciprocal. So if I have 2 to the negative third power, what I can think of is that being 2 to the negative 1 times 3 power. So that negative 1 is going to flip it over, put it in the denominator, and then that gets rid of that negative 1 and leaves me just with the 3. So I would do 2 to the third in that denominator and get the 8th there. So very similar to when we're dividing the exponents. It just, when we have that negative, it's going to flip it over. So our goal here is going to be to write everything with only positive exponents. So looking at the first one, this is x to the negative fifth. So all I will do is pull out that negative 1. So remember, we're thinking of that as x to the negative 1 times 5. And that negative 1 tells us that it's moving. So we're moving to the denominator there. So that negative 1 says, okay, move down to the denominator. And it leaves us with the 5. You could also think of a negative 1. If I turn it on its side, negative 1 looks like 1 over, and then you could put the number underneath there. So you could think about it like that as well. So 3m to the negative second. Important thing here to remember is that the negative 2 only goes with the m. It doesn't go with the 3. If they wanted it to go with the 3, they would have put this in parentheses, which they did not. So that 3 is going to stay up top. And then the m, the negative 1, moves it to the bottom, but it keeps the 2. So 3 over m squared. And it's really important to remember that all of our rules with our integers are still the same. So that negative 7 is still just a negative 7. Okay? So there is no exponent to it. It stays as a negative 7, which means it stays on top of the line. So as we get to larger parts, we're going to look through each of it and say, okay, there's a negative 7. It's going to go on top. A to the negative fourth means that's going to go to the bottom and turn positive. And then b to the third is just going to stay on top. Okay, now as we're looking here down on this, about the only way on some of them you can tell that there should be a negative is there's a little extra space in between. So that would be negative 5, negative 1. And I might end up getting a couple of these wrong. You can kind of see the negatives here on number 7. A to the negative fifth, c to the negative 12th, b to the negative third there. 8 we'll go over in a second. Let's go over it now. We have 8 p to the fifth, all to the negative second power. So you can think about this as in one of two ways. Either distributing first, so saying I'm going to do a to the negative second and p to the fifth to the negative second to get a to the negative 2 times p to the negative 10th because we multiply those exponents. Or you can think of it as flipping it first and saying 1 over 8 p to the 5th squared. Either way, though, your next step is going to be the same, and we're going to end up with 1 over 8 squared p to the 10th, and then all I have to do is 8 squared. So 8 squared would be 64. So I have 1 over 64 p to the 10th. Looking on through number 9, that's to the negative third. 10, there's a negative 3 and negative 4. 11, it's y to the negative fourth and a negative 2 there. 12 doesn't have any negatives. 13, c to the negative second, d to the negative first, and then you have d to the negative second there. 14, you have a negative 2 down on the bottom. 15, n to the negative fifth down on the bottom there. I'll look through the back real quick. You can see the negatives pretty well on this one and see if there are any that aren't popping up too well. Well, it looks like it drops off from having the negative there at the end, so I don't see any on the bottom of the more complicated ones that have that negative. Looking at 13 down. But you've got some up there, but we can see them pretty well. Okay, let's look at one more on the front. So on number 13 on the front, if I have c to the negative second, d to the negative first, and over c to the seventh, d to the negative second, you could, if you're good with subtracting negatives, you could go through and subtract that. It's probably easier to move them first and say, well, c to the seventh stays, c to the negative second moves, d to the negative first moves, and d squared moves. And so then I would cancel out and combine, and I end up with d over c to the ninth.